Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And whether you like to listen to audiobooks or read a book in the more traditional sense, I thoroughly recommend Adventures in the 21st Century by John Higgs. And now, in the beginning of that book, the author talks about why there isn't any books or movies that are full of hope and positivity about the role of technology in our future. So think about it for a moment. Almost every science fiction film you've probably ever seen will have elements of dystopia in there. And the only example of a positive movie that the author could think of was actually Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which is quite telling, isn't it? So with that in mind, I wanted to create more positive narratives with this daily tech podcast. How does that sound? Excellent! Now today, I want to find out more about Intuition Robotics and their cognitive AI platform called Q, which creates digital companions for consumer hardware brands and is attempting to redefine the relationship between humans and machines. And they also have something called ElliQ, which is a social companion for older adults, which I find incredibly intriguing, and I wanted to find out more about the results of their beta testing in people's homes. So today I invite you to let me beam your ears all the way to Israel so we can speak with Dor Skula all about Intuition Robotics. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Dor Skula, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Intuition Robotics, which is a 4-year-old startup out of Tel Aviv, Israel.
So can I see you set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about Intuition Robotics and the story behind the company? Because there is a great story there, isn't there?
Sure. I'm sure all the startups that come on your show have a great story. In our case, we founded the company with I guess a dual mission. The first is to redefine the way humans and machines interact with each other. And the second is to help older adults avoid loneliness and social isolation. And fast forward 4 years, we're now about 90 people. We've raised $58 million. And we have two products that I'd like to mention. One is the first product that we started the company around called ElliQ. And that is a proactive social robot which essentially initiates interactions with older adults and helps them be more active, be more engaged, cross a digital divide, learn new things, helps change their behavior to stick to a routine and to practice wellness and other important things for their well-being. Since you're taping this show out of London, that product was first unveiled in the Design Museum in London and is part of the new old exhibit over there. Once we started with that, we understood that actually what we were doing was relevant to other use cases as well. At the heart of it, the core technology allows us to move from an interaction of command and control, like we have with Alexa or with Google, with the voice assistants, right? We say, Alexa, turn on the lights, and they come on. Or we say, hey, Google, what's the weather outside? And it tells us what the weather is. It's always a utilitarian command from the human to the machine. But actually, by building this digital companion and by creating cognitive computing capabilities, we enhance that relationship to allow it to be proactive, meaning the agent is the one that initiates the interaction between the human and the machine, as well as the human. It will, at the right time, using context, fusing sensors together, building understanding of the world around it, approach you and suggest an activity or a conversation specifically tailored to Neil. Now, the reason it does that is it's driven by internal motivations or goals that it's trying to satisfy per use case that we tackle. In the case of aging, it will be very, very different than our work with Toyota on creating agents for cars, for example. So it's trying to achieve specific goals. It's looking at context to find the right time and the right context to allow that situation to have high degrees of success. And then it personalizes the approach towards the individual using memory cells, using reinforcement learning, using other techniques that we have in order to create a personalized experience. And it then interacts with you in a way that's in a pre-designed character and using multiple modalities, both for input but also output, like body language and lights and sound effects and screen that are all choreographed together. Sorry, that was a long answer to a very short question.
No, it's a great answer, because I think it is so difficult now to find anything positive about technology and the future. And there have been more than enough tales of tech dystopia out there. But one of the things I always try and do on this Daily Tech podcast is to try and encourage a more positive narrative. So with that in mind, can you tell me a little bit more about how you're actually seeing the human-machine relationship evolving, but in a good way?
Yeah, for sure. And we mainly see that with our first product, ElliQ, which is, we finished in 2019, having spent about 10,000 days of the product in people's homes for at least 3 months per home. The youngest tester was 78. The eldest was 98. Okay, so we have some experience. And what you see there is quite fascinating and allows us to, or requires us rather, to kind of refocus the lens of how we define an interaction. What we were looking for in the beginning were very quantitative things, like how many times do people approach which feature? As product managers at heart, that's what we're trained to do. Look at, design a problem, find a solution, and then measure how effective it is. But what we found, what users were telling us, is that they measure success or failure of ElliQ less on the utilitarian features of what she does and more on how she makes them feel. Right now, without utility, they wouldn't use the product. So don't get me wrong, utility is super important. But the fact that in the morning when they wake up and go into the living room, ElliQ will greet them and say, "Hey, good morning, Neil. How do you sleep tonight? Was it better than yesterday?" Or welcome them back after a stroll outside. Or remember important things they told them, or teach them new things, or make them smile, or make them laugh through a well-timed joke. Those type of things seem to be more important than just providing utility, such as look up this, or remind me to do that, or execute this function on my behalf. What we also found that's interesting is the type of things people confide in ElliQ. They tell her how they feel. They tell her how they slept. They tell her if they're feeling well or not. They're telling them if they're depressed. They're thanking her for being there, for making their day more delightful, or for teaching them something interesting. And those are things that I think we didn't see before too much in interactions between humans and people. They also really change their expectations. For example, they don't want to be able to expect what the product will do next. Now think about that for a second. Every machine we have in our home, we really, really want to know exactly what it will do next, right? When I press a button on the TV, I want it to react in a specific way. When I turn the mixer on in a specific speed, right? It's all about getting exactly what we want. And here, they want the reverse. They do expect the agent, though, to anticipate their needs and to change its behavior to meet those expectations. So we're seeing a radically different behavior between humans and these machines.
And just to get everybody on the same page and avoid any confusion, we have mentioned digital companions a few times. So can you just tell me exactly what digital companions are and how they are different from digital assistants, such as, well, we've got Siri. I don't mention the A word, although another voice will pop up onto this podcast. But we all know what digital assistants are, but how do they differ from digital companions?
Yeah, so digital assistants are amazing. I have 6 Alexas in my home, and my kids have grown up using them, and they add a lot of utility to our lives. What they really are a command and control interface when our hands are busy. Okay, we give a command and they execute. It's always human generated. It's always command based. It's always the individual giving a command with the power of their voice to this machine. They can find Alexa or Google Assistant can find themselves hosted by different types of hardware, sometimes with a screen, sometimes without a screen, but it will always be a voice-first interaction. It will always be the same interaction. right? When I say turn on the lights or what's the weather, the response will always be the same to me, to you, on Monday, on Tuesday, on an Echo Show or a regular Echo. And they provide essentially like a portal, a voice portal to hundreds of thousands of skills and capabilities, even though we mainly use 8 top skills such as weather and music and timer. When you move to a digital companion, it starts changing from a utilitarian interaction, which is always initiated by the human, to a bidirectional, dare I say, relationship. A relationship that has trust and empathy built in, with the goal to help change people's behaviors and change their emotions, as opposed to just provide an answer to a question or a utility upon response. And these agents have a well-defined character. They use multiple modalities to interact, multiple sensors as input, multiple outputs as outputs, and they're driven to try to fulfill very, very specific outcomes in your day-to-day life that you're interested in. Kind of, if you will, a teammate or a sidekick that's on a very specific domain along there for the ride with you. We mentioned one example on aging. Another example I can give you is an auto. We've recently we're allowed to make public the work we're doing with Toyota through Toyota Research Institute, where they are in a new car called ElliQ. They announced that it has an agent called UE. And UE's goal is to anticipate your needs as a driver and as an operator of the machine, to be able to work the different new features that are available in that car. It's also a semi-autonomous car, so to do the handoff between autonomous mode and not, to also anticipate the needs of the passengers and the family in the car. And that is done or facilitated using our digital companion platform technology called Q.
And that sets us perfectly up there to talk about Intuition Robotics' cognitive AI platform called Q, which I believe creates digital companions for consumer hardware brands. But can you tell me a little bit more about that and how it essentially is trying to redefine the relationship between humans and machines?
Right. So when you try to create this new type of relationship, you really need to create a radically different technology stack. You need to ask yourself, once you're proactive, you need to ask yourself a few questions all of the time. First is, based on the understanding of the scene in front of me right now, is this a good time to create an interruption and suggest something or not? And so you need to see who's in the scene, what are they doing? You need to compare that to a routine you've learned, et cetera, et cetera. Then you need to ask yourself a question, okay, out of the different goals I'm trying to help get fulfilled, KPIs, if you will, that need to be met, which has the highest likelihood of success given this specific context and this specific individual? And then you need to ask yourself, how do I need to frame the proposition I'm about to make to be most successful to a specific person, to Neil? Should I use humor? Should I reference a previous conversation? Should I show something on the screen? Should I only make a gesture and not even talk and just get his attention? Et cetera, et cetera. And all of that is happening in the background. So essentially, you need to design a system which is able of making decisions with the intent of meeting certain goals. These goals then drive the internal bias or the motivation of the agent and its behavior in the wild. You want to create a huge myriad of multimodal content, which has very different what we call expressions. If you want different conversations, different screen content, different gesture, movement, speeds, light patterns, so that the agent can choose the relevant version of a content based on the individual fit to make it as efficient as possible. So basically, you move from a decision tree system, which is like the regular voice assistants or chatbots, where a user says a command, you parse it to an intent, and then bring it to a skill or whatever, and then you go along a very predefined dialogue tree. Instead of that, if you really want to create this type of proactive experience, you move to a non-deterministic experience, to a non-linear experience. So you need to basically create a lot of optionality, both in the type of experience and the content of them. You need to create biases to the AI decision-making capability. And of course, you need to have a very strong way to learn with very limited signals from the user, for which we use hierarchical reinforcement learning.
So do you have any use cases that you could possibly share, just to help anyone listening understand how this could create value in their world, or whether that be a business or an individual?
Sure. So the two use cases we've implemented this technology in are two domains. One is aging, the other is in auto. In auto, the agent does things like when the car has sensors that notice that you're drowsy. Today, what it does is it puts a picture of a coffee cup up on the dashboard. Okay, so instead of just doing that, we will do what you would do to me if we were riding a car together and I was falling asleep. You'd probably start talking to me. You might open the window. You might lower the air condition. You might suggest that we stop in the nearest Starbucks, right? You do things. And likewise, the agent has full control of the outputs of the car. So it will start doing things. It will reduce the temperature, open the window, massage your chair, etc. We do things like help you meet goals you might have in the car, reduce the OC emissions, improve your fuel capacity, plan your charging better, discover new features you're not aware of, like auto park or adaptive cruise control, or create magical moments between the family and you on a long drive by finding the right time to do some kind of cool quiz or fun family trivia or what have you. In aging, the examples have more to do with wellness and avoiding loneliness and social isolation of older adults. If you would ask yourself, what would a healthy day look like? It probably would not be just spending most of it in front of the TV. It would be learning new things. It would be listening to music. It would be trying to stick to a routine. We promote wellness and mindfulness, hydration, which is important, news, getting people to go out and about and leave their home, etc., etc. So it's kind of a sidekick, if you will, that helps the older adult stay active and engaged in this part of their lives. You can imagine different use cases that could use the same technology, as long as they're actuators, as long as there are multiple sensor inputs, and as long as one believes that there is room for an agent and a character to be a persistent presence, then we can talk about it. And people are welcome to contact us. We've been contacted by banks and by hospitality companies and by toy manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera.
And you did mention earlier in the podcast ElliQ. So can you expand on that a little, and the purpose of this social companion for older adults? Because I think more than ever now, I think we've all got empathy with people that are elderly and trapped in their homes, because we're all experiencing it ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, we were talking about that before we started recording a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think that one of the amazing things that I'm hoping would be a positive outcome of coronavirus, if one can imagine positive outcomes from this craziness we're in, is that we will empathize a lot more with people that are lonely and isolated. And I think that we are talking a lot more about our elders. We are thinking about them a lot more during these really, really horrible days. But in about 50% of the older adults around us speak to a human once a week or less. Okay, to one human once a week or less.
Yeah.
They see somebody maybe every 3 weeks or 2 weeks. In the UK, it's so bad that there is a junior secretary for loneliness. It's proven that this state creates acceleration of dementia, depression, heart disease, and even earlier mortality, and it costs our health system billions of dollars from health deterioration. And yet, we've done really nothing as society. We haven't really tackled this. 30% of our population is about to become old or already is old, depending on the country you're in. Instead of this period of our lives being 10 years or so, it's going to be about a third of our life. We're going to spend a big portion of it by ourselves. This is a massive change in the human condition. And as society, we haven't responded to that. We ignore it, and a lot of people are suffering. So what I'm really, really hoping is that one of the outcomes of Corona will be us waking up to this issue and understanding that when we leave our homes and kind of see what's out there again, there are going to be millions of people that were isolated before and will remain isolated after. And we can help them with technology. We can help them without technology. The with technology part is why we built ElliQ. So ElliQ helps close the digital divide. and allow you to easily Skype or message or video chat with your family and send pictures. But no less important than that, because we can't spend all of our day talking to our parents. It helps the older adults themselves be a bigger part of their community, to learn new things, to stay curious about the world, to play cognitive games, to mindfulness is very popular. But also she just takes an interest, she asks you how you slept and how do you feel, and she remembers that and will reference that in later conversations. And we're starting to work with more and more companies to provide their special capabilities on top of this platform that older adults are building a relationship with, whether it's medication reminders or more health or more digital services that are just dead simple to use with ElliQ, that just approaches you at the right time and says, hey, do you want to try so-and-so or do such and such?
It really does feel like it's a great opportunity there. And I also believe, you did touch on this a few moments ago, but you do a lot of work with automotive OEMs too. Is there anything else you can share about your work there, just for people listening that could be working in that industry?
Yeah, so we recently announced our partnership with Toyota around a car called ElliQ through the Toyota Research Institute, where they're using our Q platform to create a proactive agent called UE, which will anticipate the needs of the users and operates basically all of the actuators into the car to create an in-character proactive experience that also highlights and amplifies the Toyota brand, as well as provides a lot of value to its users. So use cases are around safety, around feature discovery, around delightful moments in the car, and so on. And Toyota is not the only OEM or automotive company we work with. It's just the only one we're allowed to talk about at this point in time. And it's a very exciting use case for us, because the auto industry is going through a very, very large discontinuity after decades, really, where the driving experience hasn't changed. It's now changing every time you get a new car. There's more tech in it. It keeps its lane, it hits the brakes, it corrects the lane for you, it keeps the speed, but it doesn't explain what's going on, right? The car's like making independent decisions by itself. And a lot of people feeling anxious because of that, they turn those features off. But of course, this is just the beginning. We're going to see cars being more and more autonomous, up to the point where we'll get to level 3 and level 4 autonomy, where there'll be certain rides on certain roads where the car will be fully autonomous. But we still have the responsibility. We're still going to need to resume control over certain periods of time. We'll have questions. We'll need to create a dialogue with a co-pilot, if you will, of this car. And there's no capability to do that today, especially one that also tries to sense what the user is going through and optimizes the experience to them. Also, as car companies are becoming not just car companies, but mobility companies, they're trying to provide additional mobility services to us and meet our mobility needs. Where having this kind of concierge, teammate, co-driver makes a lot of sense. And of course, it's all branded for the OEM. It takes use of all of the sensors they put into a specific vehicle and creates a unique experience, which allows them to differentiate based on experience and not just based on how it feels to drive the physical car.
And like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, it can be difficult to find positive news stories, especially around how technology is reshaping our future, because it's always those dystopian tales. And I suspect that's because bad news sells and people are more likely to click on those kind of stories. But I am trying to change that narrative. So to end on a positive note, what is your grand vision for the human-machine relationship, and what role do you think intuition robotics will play in that future?
Yeah, so we're definitely collecting people's names and putting a whitelist of sorts of anybody that approaches us. We'll make sure the robot doesn't kill them when they eventually take over. No, I'm not. I of course kid. Look, I think that every time there's change, we tend to resist it and fear it, and that makes a lot of sense because a lot of people's lives are going to change because of automation. What we're trying to deal with is more on the human side. There are going to be a lot more smart machines around us. That is a fact. The question is, how can we help those machines anticipate our needs as humans? how can it help? How can we use the fact that the world population is aging and there are less caregivers around? We just don't have enough young, able bodies. Look at Japan, for example, to service all of our needs. How can we train machines to help us and meet some of the needs the social needs, the personal needs that we have, of curiosity and of need fulfillment and so on? And how can we make it a lot less technical and a lot more intuitive and, dare I say, fun and delightful to interact with these machines? And yes, it's a little scary when people hear us talk about, oh, the machine is going to make a decision and it will customize itself and it has some cognitive capabilities. But I want to calm everybody down. It is far less advanced than you think. I mean, the machine does not know anything. We didn't teach it. It has no ability to conjure thoughts by itself or to make real decisions by itself. It all acts based on the programming and algorithms that were created in it. But I do think there is obviously a lot of good we can do with technology to help people that need it, to help us stay safer on the road, live longer, and age gracefully.
And that's a beautiful part to end on. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening that would like to find out more information or contact your team, can you just point them in the best direction of doing that?
Yeah, the best thing is to just go to intuitionrobotics.com or ElliQ.com if you're interested in the ElliQ product, or just reach out to me. I'm Dor Schooler on Twitter, or just my email is my first name at intuitionrobotics.com. Especially if you're a young or not young developer that's looking to join our algorithms team or our dev team or our product team. We are, even in these days, continuing to look aggressively to great talent. So please reach out to us.
Fantastic. Well, there's so much I've loved about today's conversation, but I just love the whole ethos of the company and how you're redefining that relationship between humans and machines. I think it's fascinating where it's heading, and I'd love to stay in touch with you and get you back on here later this year and find out how things are going. But more than anything, just a big thank you for sharing that story with me today.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me on and taking an interest. Stay safe during these turbulent times.
There really does seem to be a fantastic startup scene in Tel Aviv in Israel, and it's quite high on my list of places to visit at the moment, but there's a small problem of no planes flying anywhere. But I do hope to go there at some point and hear more stories about this and explore the role that technology can play in our future in a positive way. And hearing Dor talk about using technology to redefine the relationship between humans and machines is incredibly exciting. And that is why I record this podcast every single day, to share stories like that, because we need more positive tech stories in the world, don't you think? And before we started recording the episode today, our guest was hopeful in saying that now that we all have experienced isolation and loneliness, maybe everyone can show a little bit more empathy towards the elderly and the lonely and help a little bit more rather than be just wrapped up in our own world. So I think that's food for thought indeed. But any aspect of today's interview, or if you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, whatever it is, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Let's carry on this conversation and build a better, brighter future together. So come and join me again tomorrow where we'll do it all again. But for today, just a genuine thank you for choosing to listen to this Daily Tech podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.